Grandpa stole his first buggy in 1892. I met your grandma pig slopping in 46.
Oh, every Christmas we'd visit my Uncle Fred in prison.
And welcome, America, to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Boy, we got a couple of great guests today. Genealogist Jennifer Mendlesohn is here. Adina Newman, her partner, is here as well. And they're working on a new project called the DNA Reunion Project, trying to bring Holocaust survivors and their children back in touch with family members wherever they may be in the world. They're going to talk about that. They're going to talk about Jewish research, Jewish DNA. It's going to be a great couple of segments coming up here, starting in about 10 minutes. Right now, let's go out to Boston. I got to get David Allen Lambert on the line right now. He's the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. David, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay, except we have snow.
Oh, don't like that.
Yeah.
Don't like that.
Yeah, it's a 4-letter word out here in Massachusetts.
Hey, have you heard about this new thing? It's called ChatGPT. ChatGPT. It's artificial intelligence.
Yep, and I thought the only artificial intelligence genealogists need was our Ask Us Anything, but apparently I'm wrong.
I got to tell you, I heard about it the other day for the first time. I checked it out, and I thought, okay, how is this going to work for genealogy? What can it do for us? And first of all, the things I learned about this thing is it's exciting. It's horrifying because things can be incorrect. It can be misused, and it's in its infancy right now. So I signed up, got an account at ChatGPT. And by the way, that's not the name of the website. You'll have to actually search ChatGPT to bring it up with the actual. It's under a company site, so just do it that way. But here's what I did, David. I've been working on the very beginning stages of a little historical novel on my great-grandfather, the fireman in New York City. And I figured, okay, I need a little detail about how did hose companies work that he belonged to in New York in the 1850s. So I asked that question in this thing, and here's what it said. In the 19th century, hand-pulled equipment was commonly used by hose fire companies in New York City. One type of hand-pulled equipment used by hose companies was the hand pump. This was a small portable pump typically made of metal that was operated by a handle. And it goes on and gives me all the details that I could actually use in this story. I thought, hey, that's pretty good.
Wow.
Let's try this then. Okay. What were significant events that happened in New York City, in 1857? So it gives me this list. It says, number one, the Panic of 1857, the economic recession that began in the U.S. and quickly spread to Europe, and it gives details. Number two, the New York City police riot. On June 16, 1857, a large crowd gathered in front of police headquarters in New York to protest the police department's treatment of Irish immigrants. The opening of Central Park was number three. Didn't know that. Then I asked about 1856, and what it told me is that was the year that the volunteer fire department became a paid department. Well, I know that that's not the case. That actually happened in 1865, and that's a little bit dangerous, right?
That is. It's almost finding typos for historical things.
So I asked about, okay, how about the Secord family of New Rochelle, New York? And it writes, the first Secord to settle in the New Rochelle area was Abraham Secord, who arrived in the 1690s from Long Island. Thing was that Abraham was not the first settler from New Rochelle. That was Ambrose Secord, who came over from France. So again, there are things that, you can get wrong. I did a little thing on my dad, who was not particularly famous himself, but he was a music arranger for the Ed Sullivan Show, and it gave me a full little bio on him, except it got to the very end and it said he worked with a variety of acts and performers, including Elvis Presley, the Beatles, and many, many more. He never worked with Elvis and the Beatles. That's just not true. I don't know where they got that from. So then I tried something a little different. I asked it to give me a biblical account of the radio show Extreme Genes. And this is what it wrote. And lo, the people were blessed with the gift of extreme genes, a radio show that doth delve into the mysteries of their ancestry and lineage, with hosts that are wise and well-versed in the ways of genealogy. And the listeners were filled with wonder and gratitude for the knowledge that was imparted unto them. And it came to pass that the show was broadcast far and wide, and many were the people who were touched by its wisdom and its teachings. But I thought that was pretty amazing. And, I thought about this. I thought, David has a lot of stuff about himself out on the internet. So I just wrote this in specifically. I said, write a poem about David Allen Lambert. And this is what we got.
Oh, no.
David Allen Lambert, a man of great renown, with a heart full of passion, his work was his crown. A genealogist by trade, a historian true, he delved deep in the past to bring stories anew. With a keen eye for detail and a mind sharp as a knife, he pieced together the puzzle of one's genealogical life. From birth and death records to tales passed down through the years, he traced the family tree, wiping away the tears. With a love for the past and a desire to share, he helped others discover their own families rare. So here's to David Allen Lambert, a man with a heart of gold who has helped many discover their family story untold.
Oh, wow. I was always wondering if I got a really large gravestone, what epitaph I would want under my name and date.
I'll send it to you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
See, and that's what artificial intelligence can do in its infancy, at least at this point. So a little bit scary at one end and a little bit inaccurate in some others, but I have had a great time playing with this, putting it through the paces. So I thought instead of talking about all the stories this week, we had to talk about this because it's nuts. So
that's cutting edge. That's great. Yep. When you signed up for it, Fish, did you have to pay or was it free?
Free stuff.
Yeah, good price.
Get signed up and enjoy it, and there we go. So, David, take a break. We'll talk to you at the back end of the show. And coming up next, we're going to talk to Jennifer Mendlesohn and Adina Newman about the DNA Reunion Project when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Have you hit a brick wall in your family tree? Are you unsure how to use your DNA test results to resolve a research question? Do you want to travel where your ancestors walked and need to find details before you go? Need help joining a lineage society? Whatever your genealogy research question, the answer is Legacy Tree Genealogist. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been helping clients all over the globe discover their story since 2004. Legacy Tree has carefully selected and trained professionals who specialize in hundreds of countries and languages, as well as probate research and DNA analysis. And when you need experts on the ground in the countries where your ancestors came from, Legacy Tree Genealogists calls upon its global network of on-site researchers who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. That's legacytree.com.
Genies, our friends at BYU TV have a new series out created just for us, family historians. It's called How I Got Here. It's a fast-paced travel show where young adults accompany their immigrant parents back to where they came from, their countries of origin. These are 10-day trips of a lifetime where these parent-child duos relive the sacrifice, struggle, and circumstances that led their families to leave to where they are now. There's a new episode every week with visited countries including Italy, Serbia, Mexico, Chile, Israel, Slovakia, and Ghana. BYU TV is on Roku and Fire Stick, online at byutv.org, or through the BYU TV app. How I Got Here is available now with a new episode every week. Feel the impact this journey has on those who grew up not knowing. And just a warning, keep a box of Kleenex nearby. You're going to need it. Hey Genies, as we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow Genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Hey, welcome back. It's America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. And my guest today, so excited to be back with my friend Jennifer Mendlesohn and her friend Adina Newman, who we have not met in the past. But welcome to the show, ladies.
Thanks so much for having us.
Both of them are genealogists, both of them deep in the weeds in DNA and Jewish research. And boy, Jewish DNA research, always challenging, isn't it, Jennifer?
You can say that again. I always like to say it's like that old quote about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, that Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in high heels.
Yes.
It really sort of turns up the degree of difficulty. And Adina and I always joke when we get a case that's not Jewish, it just seems like this is so easy.
Right? I can only imagine. And what we're talking about, by the way, for people who aren't familiar with it, endogamy. And endogamy is where people live in small groups or areas and they intermarry over and over and over again. And as a result, when you get a DNA match to somebody, it's often magnified as to how closely you are related to that person. And this is very common in Jewish ancestry and also many small towns, even in the Midwest. So it's not unique to Jewish research, but Jewish research certainly is dramatically affected by it because so many people marry within the faith, right?
Definitely a big part of it. I think also there's that founder effect. You know, they say Ashkenazi Jews descend from something like 350 people. And just the records themselves, you know, I have my mother-in-law, her family's all from Quebec, and you can see a little bit of endogamy in her matches, but those trees go back hundreds and hundreds of years, so you can see, you know, all the cousin marriages and how they affect the DNA. It's not like that so much with Ashkenazi Jewish. You're lucky for some people if they can get back to the 1800s even.
Yes.
1700s. It's a very different ballgame.
Absolutely. And you guys have been doing this for many years. Jennifer, you've been doing it for 10 and professionally for the last 4 or 5. Adina, you've been a professional the last 5 years or so and have been in it for 15. So you obviously get a lot of stories from this. And it's got to be enormously satisfying when you jump through these hoops, like you say, Jennifer, dancing backwards with high heels, to find those results that your people are looking for.
Very, very, because we also deal a lot with the sort of specter of the Holocaust.
Yes.
It casts an unmistakable shadow over all Jewish family research that you do, because it's virtually impossible to find a Jewish person in America today who doesn't have some connection to the Holocaust. For some of us, it's very close. You know, in my family, my husband's mother and grandparents are survivors of the war. You know, in my own family, I lost countless numbers of my family in the Holocaust. So a lot of people think that there's this big black hole, that the Holocaust severed us from our history, that there's a huge myth that the Nazis destroyed all the records during World War II and that you can't embark on a search for Jewish family history. But Adina and I love to dispel that myth because it's not true. It's certainly, as we just discussed, a lot more difficult than it is for some people, but it can be done. And when you start making those connections and facilitating those reunions, it can be priceless.
Sure.
My very first venture in genealogy was I discovered that my husband's 95-year-old grandmother, who had lost both of her parents, all 6 of her siblings, her grandfather, and about 99% of every aunt, uncle, and cousin she ever had, I discovered accidentally in her 95th year that she had 3 living first cousins.
Oh.
And it completely changed the family making that discovery. You can imagine that sort of reunion, how meaningful and precious it was. And she later said to me, now I know why I lived so long. I lived so long so I could see this day. And, that got me hooked.
Oh, I can only imagine. That had to be one of the happiest days of your life.
It was incredible. I often joke that I felt like I had bent the space-time continuum.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with someone who believes that they are alone in the world and then to discover they're not alone in the world. And it had this incredible ripple effect through the family, meaning, she survived, but she lost her parents, she lost all her siblings, and her children grew up never having a cousin or an aunt or uncle, and they don't even have any photographs of their grandparents. But once I connected with these cousins, they had pictures of other family members. They could see the faces of people, and that was so powerful.
Wow.
And that's what we're trying to do. That's what Adina and I do. We try to restore the past and connections to as many people as we can.
So talking about these German records, Germany actually did an amazing job of record keeping, which, considering all the war crimes they committed, is astonishing. Are those now available to researchers?
Yes, I think that's one of the biggest myths that need to be busted. People say, the Nazis destroyed everything. Not only is that not true from kind of the systemic perspective, but at least I know in my family and a lot of the people that I've done work for, that's the only record that still is readily available is the one the Nazis created.
Wow.
So there are different databases that you can access. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum has a bunch of records. There's Yad Vashem in Israel. They have a central names database that's very helpful. There are the Rolson archives that have just a treasure trove of records, and all of these are readily available online, and that's just the surface. Of course, like anything else, not everything is online and digitized. You have to go to the actual repositories and make requests.
It's just astonishing to think that those records are all there, that they were never destroyed, because they were so efficient, right? Like you're talking about, that this was done systemically. And so those records have survived in such a way now that with our modern technology, people can access that material. And that's got to be exciting for a lot of people listening right now who may have never thought of things like this.
Yeah, it's a very sobering thing,
yes,
right?
Of course.
We're excited about seeing somebody who was put in a concentration camp because it tells us the names of their parents and their journey and where they ultimately ended up.
Sure.
And I think the way we tend to describe it, it's hard to say a happy ending. We use terms like there's healing there's closure.
Right.
And I think closure is the best way to describe it, because personally, I found branches in my family that we didn't even know about. Just people didn't talk about it. And that's a big aspect, I think, a lot for Jewish families, Jewish genealogy, that because of the tragedy of these horrible crimes that people just tried to forget and didn't tell their children, their grandchildren. So they're big surprises, and just learning their names and honoring their identities, giving their names back it's important work.
Yes.
And, for Jews, we'd say it's a mitzvah, kind of holy work in some way, just to give these people their names back so nobody forgets them.
It is a holy work. And, when you consider the ripple effect through time, the ripple effect's not going to end anytime. Talk about how the ordinary person could go about looking at some of these records and what the impact is the first time you looked at that.
Well, as Adina said, sometimes it might be hard to convey to people who didn't grow up as we did in the shadow of the Holocaust. You have to understand that we have entire branches of our trees that are just stunted.
Yeah.
And again, it's so hard to fathom for some people if you're not familiar with this. But remember, these are not people who died who have graves and mentions on Find a Grave and death records. These are people who were just wiped off the face of the planet. And anything that we can do, I've written about something as simple as finding the marriage record of a young woman, a cousin of my grandfather who was murdered, it just feels so important to say these were not nameless, faceless people. These were human beings with hopes and desires and dreams and love, and anything we can do to sort of restore their dignity just feels really important.
Sure.
Again, when you ask how the ordinary person can do it, we're professional researchers, and it's a little bit easier for us to sort of dig out this information than it might be for the average person. But you really can start very simply. One very simple first place to go would be Yad Vashem, which is the website of the Holocaust Museum in Israel. And they have something called the Shoah Names Database. And what that is an attempt to document every single person who was lost. And a very simple mechanism that exists for that is after the war, people were encouraged to write what were called pages of testimony. And they are exactly what they sound like. It is a page dedicated to a person who perished with as much information as possible, their names, where they lived, their age, the names of their parents, how they died, if the person had any information about that. And that can be a very simple place to start. You can put in a name, you can put in a town. And another interesting thing that people can do that might be a start, let's say you know that your grandparents were survivors, but you don't know the names of the rest of their family. You can actually search that database by submitters' names. So it's possible that while your grandfather may not have told you the names of his siblings and parents who perished, he may have submitted pages of testimony for them. So if you search for him as a submitter, he might come up. Those are some very simple places to start. And of course, if your grandparents are survivors and they came, say, to the U.S., there will be information about them in U.S. records. Their immigration files you can look into, depending on where they came and if they naturalized. There are different repositories for those. There might also be vital records. If they came before 1950, you might find them in the 1950 census. If they died here, there will be death records for them, et cetera, et cetera. So you can start to sort of piece it together.
All right. I'm talking to Jennifer Mendlesohn and Adina Newman. They are genealogists specializing in Jewish research and the Holocaust. And ladies, you are deep in the weeds now in a brand new project with the Center for Jewish History in New York City called the DNA Reunion Project, having everything to do with what happened in the Holocaust. We're going to come back and talk about that in 5 minutes when we return on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, we're back on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. My guests today, Jennifer Mendlesohn and Adina Newman. They're both genealogists specializing in Jewish research and Jewish DNA. And we got a lot of information in our first segment talking about how you research that difficult past. One question I wanted to ask you about the Holocaust, Adina. The thing I noticed in our conversation in the first segment was we talk a lot about cousins. And I'm not so sure that everybody who is non-Jewish goes into those cousin branches nearly as much. And I think that that's because the cousin branches, because of the Holocaust, are much more highly valued. Yes?
Yeah, I think that really for me, any good genealogy, you're not just building up and down, you're building side to side.
Right.
And especially when you're working with genetic genealogy, people commonly, whether or not it's among, the Jewish community or not, people get panicky when they see relatively close matches and they don't recognize last names. And a great way to resolve that is to focus on those cousin branches, look for your grandparents' siblings, your great-grandparents' siblings, and build down. We do a lot of that simply because many of us don't have that information. I mean, personally for me, there's a DNA match at my heritage that I have and no idea where to place it. And I have my mom tested and I had her second cousin that we found, through databases that was stuck in the Soviet Union. And a lot of Jews are actually finding cousins that were living in Russia, the former Soviet Union, these days, which adds to your family tree. But he is living in Latvia and he has no idea how he's related to us. And the best we can tell is that my great-grandfather has a sibling that may be unaccounted for. And that's just a common thing that you have in these Jewish trees. I certainly have that close. Great-grandparents, their siblings, I know a few of them, but I'm sure I'm missing some. And you see it in the DNA. So I'm sure that he's a second cousin to my mother, but I'm not quite sure how. And that's just the reality. So we work really hard to kind of try to build those trees, which are harder for many of us who are more recent immigrants, or just the records were not taken in the same way that they might have been in the United States or England, for example. So it's different. It's just different challenges that we have, different obstacles.
Sure, of course. Jennifer, tell me about the DNA Reunion project you two are working on for the Center for Jewish History in New York City. I'm really excited about what you're doing with it, and you're just getting started.
We are, and we are so excited about it. Basically, Adina and I sort of came to this idea after doing a lot of work. We saw the power of genetic genealogy to work in cases where the paper trail has been severed. Both of us have done a lot of unknown parent work for either adoptees or donor-conceived people. And we realized that, of course, the Holocaust was sort of the great severer of paper trails, where
Sure.
so many people either went underground, children were hidden, people took on new identities, people were scattered after the war and had no means to reconnect with family. And we started working on cases where we could use DNA to help people in that situation. And, there was only so much we could do, just sort of the two of us on an ad hoc basis, which is the way we had been working. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could partner with a Jewish organization that could give us a platform to do this sort of on a broader scale? And we connected with the Center for Jewish History in New York City. And at the end of November, we launched this project. Right now, we're in sort of a pilot. We're just getting started and seeing what we can do. But our goal is to give free DNA tests to Holocaust survivors and their children if they are interested in testing. And Adina and I are on board to do any sort of high-order genetic genealogy consulting that's necessary, whether that means working on cases of children who were hidden, people who are just discovering that they are Jewish and didn't know it, cases like that. And we are really, really excited because we know that genetic genealogy can be an incredible tool for this community, and we want to sort of evangelize about it and spread the word. We're seeing so many people who did not know that taking a DNA test connects you to relatives, which obviously as genealogists for us is the most important piece of it. And just that alone has been really satisfying. People just think that taking that test will give them a pie chart of their ethnicity. And most Jewish people are like, I'm going to come back 100% Ashkenazi. Why would I even bother? So that's been really gratifying to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of people in every community within the country and within the world who have no idea about matching and what it can do and how much fun it is to put together and how satisfying. And, I always tell people, I build puzzles, but when I'm done, I get to keep the puzzle. We don't throw it back in the box and throw it on a shelf, So, right. Adina, as you look at this situation, drawing on your past experience, talk about some of the people that you've helped to connect with the Holocaust. You already had one in your family. How about some others outside of it?
Sure. So the first one that Jennifer and I worked on together is the story of Jackie Young. And Jackie Young is this lovely man living in the UK. He was a child survivor of the concentration camp Theresienstadt, or Terezin, which is in the Czech Republic. And his story was just absolutely fascinating. The way we learned about his case was he was on a BBC show, DNA Secrets, and it was all abuzz within the Jewish genealogy community because he found out late in life that he was actually a survivor of the Holocaust. His adopted parents never told him that, and he found his original birth certificate, but it didn't have his father's name on it. So he had questions his whole life, who's my father? So he went on the show, and they brought him some more distant cousins on his father's side. And Jennifer and I both saw this and said, you know what? What if we reach out to Jackie and try to take it further and actually find the identity of his biological father?
Wow.
Right. So Jennifer and I are actually administrators of a popular DNA Jewish genetic genealogy group on Facebook. And one of our members, her mother was a neighbor of Jackie or something like that. That's how it happened. So they put us in contact, and we told him, Jackie, if you give us your DNA and, what you have, we'll try to figure this out for you. And he readily passed it along. And I think it's safe to say that within a few days, Jennifer and I had a candidate for who his biological father was. And it just took me calling the only individual in the United States who could make this happen for us, and having a very uncomfortable phone call because I was petrified that they'd say no to testing. So I called and he said yes. And this was a first cousin once removed to Jackie, the only one in the United States who could have done this for us. And Jackie has this whole new family. He has the tree plastered on his wall. Oh. He's framed it. And it's just, there are no words to describe how meaningful it was to us. I mean, for Jackie, the sense of closure and healing, decades trying to fill this hole for him, for his children, for the people we've met along the way. And I think that's a really important point. It's not just the survivor or whoever we're helping in that moment. It's all the people we meet along the way, their children. I mean, there's a domino effect here. It really brings the community together to solve one of these.
Boy, absolutely. So, Jennifer, if somebody is a survivor of the Holocaust, or they are a child of a survivor of the Holocaust, what do they do to get in touch with you and be part of the DNA Reunion Project?
We have a website. It's dna.cjh.org, and there's a lot more information about the program and how it works, and there's a very simple application people can fill out. If they have questions, they could email us, dna@cjh.org. But we are happily receiving submissions at the moment and trying to get kits out to people. And we're actually just got word that the first person who tested with one of our kits has results. Ooh. So we are about to see what happens.
She's Jennifer Mendlesohn. She's Adina Newman. They're genealogists. They're partners working on this DNA Reunion Project for the Center for Jewish History in New York City. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. It's so important, and I'm excited and thrilled for you because I know what kind of fulfillment this is to make some of these breakthroughs on behalf of so many people.
Thank you for having us.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert rejoins the show as we go through Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Genies, 10 years ago, in April of 2012, when the government released the 1940 census, it took Ancestry several months to complete and review an accurate index. Fast forward to today. Using proprietary handwriting reading software, it took Ancestry only 9 days to get the job done with the 1950 census. Now, they held back results for a time for actual humans to review what the software had created. And after just a few weeks, it became obvious the software was near perfect, and the computer-generated index to 153,000 names has been released. What does this mean in your journey to research your family? It means you can search the entire database quickly and easily for your family members. Never has a U.S. Census Index been created as quickly as this. Go to Ancestry.com today, click on the 1950 census on the homepage, and see what you can discover. Hey, Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com.
Have you hit a brick wall in your family tree? Are you unsure how to use your DNA test results to resolve a research question? Do you want to travel where your ancestors walked and need to find details before you go? Need help joining a lineage society? Whatever your genealogy research question, the answer is Legacy Tree Genealogist. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been helping clients all over the globe discover their story since 2004. Legacy Tree has carefully selected and trained professionals who specialize in hundreds of countries and languages, as well as probate research and DNA analysis. And when you need experts on the ground in the countries where your ancestors came from, Legacy Tree Genealogists calls upon its global network of on-site researchers who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. That's legacytree.com.
And welcome back to Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. It is Fisher here, along with that man of great renown with a full heart of passion. His work as a crown, David Allen Lambert. That was a little bit of the poem, if you didn't catch the earlier segment today, with the thing that AI wrote about him. Unbelievable.
Well, it could be worse.
Yeah, it could be. All right, we got questions today for Ask Us Anything, and we're going to start with one from Lisa in your neck of the woods, Dave, Belmont, Massachusetts. And she writes, Fish and Dave, newbie here, can you explain to me the basics of the U.S. Census records, when they started and what they contained? I think we could do a few minutes on this.
Oh, a few, probably a lot. Well, the first census, of course, is 1790, whether you know it or not. And it's a really interesting one because it really is only keeping track of two age groups, and it's for males. You're getting males that are of military age, then you're getting males under military age, and then you also get females. It's fascinating that that census would be done for military because 7 years earlier, we just got out of the Revolutionary War.
Yep.
But we would need to know our military strength because the new federal government only founded just a year before. Then by 1800, 1810, 1820, 1830, 1840, you're still getting the statistical hash marks, essentially.
Yep.
How many children between 10 and 15, how many men that are 40 to 45, or 60 years and upwards, or then sometimes 100 years and upwards.
Yeah, it just depends. It changes from census to census in those early years, and then it gets good in 1850.
Oh, it does, because it names everybody in the household. You also get in that census, for those that were enslavers, it will give you the accounting of how many male and female enslaved that they have, so under a slave schedule. Then, of course, the 1860 is quite similar to the 1850.
Right.
And the one thing, you get these names, but what's really frustrating, I'll give you an example. You have a household of John Lambert and Mary Lambert. You know, that's your ancestor. But all of a sudden, there's now a David Lambert in there. You don't know how he fits. It's either a son, well, it's the same name, right? You would think. But he could be a nephew.
Yeah.
They don't give relationships until 1870.
Okay.
So it makes it very, very complicated.
Yep.
For those genealogists like myself that have been doing this for a long time, like you too, Fish,
Yep.
you may remember the only way we could search the 1880 census was for something that was called Soundex.
Yes.
Still have it now. It's a tick mark when you do ancestry searching and other websites because it's a great way of finding names that are spelled similar. However, the Soundex for the 1880, the rule was that it was for anybody who had children under the age of 10. Would have meant you would have been about the age to retire in the 1930s, so they indexed it for that purpose only. So if you had an older couple, they won't have children under 10. There was no way to find them unless you browsed town by town. So fast forward, Family Search made the CDs, indexed the 1880 census, and the rest is history.
Yep, that's right. And it was a big boon to researchers at that point to have all the names. And we don't even think about that anymore. Nobody even talks about the fact that the 1880 index was made for the Social Security Administration.
And, you know, the 1890 would have been a great one, but we only have it for a very, very small fraction of the United States because it burned.
Yeah, but we should mention, however, if you had ancestors in New York, which was a very big city by that time, they didn't like the results they got from the 1890 census, so they went back out. Yeah, and they did a police census, and that still exists, so we have an 1890 census for New York.
And if your ancestor was in the Union Army or forces in the Civil War, one of the schedules called the Veteran Schedule, widows and veterans of the Civil War are listed if you're in states Kentucky through Wyoming. Unfortunately, the government threw out everything that covered states A to I back in the 40s because they figured they didn't need it.
Oh, boy.
So that's the gist of the 19th century censuses, and I hope that gives you a little history lesson.
All right, Lisa, thanks for the question. We got another one coming up next when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Okay, final segment of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fisher here with David Allen Lambert. David, this question comes from LeVar in Salt Lake City, Utah. And he says, hey, fellas, last week I got a batch of several original photos that I received from a second cousin, once removed, that I met as a DNA match. How cool is that? So what are your best tools for digitally making these look their best? Thanks, LeVar. Good question. You start, Dave. You do a lot of this too.
Well, one of the things I would definitely advise is scanning them at a high resolution.
Yep.
Even going as far as not just making them a JPEG, but making them a TIFF. One thing with JPEGs, the image resolution every time you open them degenerates a little bit. I mean, not so noticeable to the eye.
A little bit. But, you know, they say that it takes maybe even 100 open and closes before you even start to have anything of any significance at all. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But I agree with you. We got to keep very high DPI on this, so scan it at a high resolution.
600 DPI is what I use.
I go 1200.
Goodness, you're trying to see the fly on that person's nose, aren't you?
Yep.
But there's so many tech tools out there, especially with what MyHeritage has done.
Sure.
I mean, for sharpening images, and hey, if you want to see your great-great-grandmother smile and sing,
yes, that's really true.
That too.
That really is. And yes, it's strange when they added the voices to it this past year as well. There are combinations of things that I like to use for different circumstances. I like to initially go in and clean up a photograph using Adobe Photoshop Elements. It's the least expensive. It just has the couple of tools that I need, and find, like you say, the little tiny things, get them out of there. And then once I've cleaned it up that way, then you can go in and do the sharpening tool. You can use the colorization tool over on MyHeritage. They have colorization now on Ancestry, so they have those things as well. You know, I don't think we can really get into a full lesson on how you do all these things and what all those tools specifically are. We can tell you that a combination of these things can really work well. Sometimes, for instance, I find that colorization does not do the picture any favors. Sometimes it just comes out a complete dumpster fire. Forget it.
And contrast and brightness are the two tools that I use all the time.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Those are real simple, and they're just sliding a bar across or spinning a dial, and you don't have to hit save right away.
No.
And then you can always use that wonderful button called undo.
All the time. You know, there was a picture that I think about that belonged to my wife's side of the family. It was from the 1880s, late 1880s, and it had faded dramatically, and it had a tear down the middle of it. And it was very yellow, and it was one of those cabinet cards. And so I was able to take that and continue to do the contrast like you're talking about, and the light and dark and the shading. But I wasn't able to get the contrast back with one pass at it. So I kept doing it, saving it, doing it, and getting it better and better contrast. But then the color became too intense, so I'd have to go in and pull the color way back down before I could do it again. And in the end, this digitized version is so much better than the original. I don't even know why I bothered to keep the original. But we completely restored it, and it looks absolutely fabulous. So there are all kinds of tools, and it's so much fun. I mean, if you're like one of those people who sits around and wants to do jigsaw puzzles all day, sit around and work on some of these and practice your skills restoring photos. You're going to love it.
It really is amazing. And now the tools are out there that even an amateur can become an expert in a short amount of time.
Well, it's funny you say that, because everybody thinks that I'm this genius with these photos. It's like, no, I push a button. I slide a slide. It's not that hard. Just use your eyes, but it's a lot of fun. David, it's been great today to know somebody the subject of an artificial intelligence poem. You've been magnificent as always. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, friend. It was awesome.
Talk to you next week. Thanks also to Jennifer Mendlesohn and Adina Newman for coming on and talking about their Holocaust DNA reunion project. If you missed any of it, of course, catch the podcast on Apple Media, iHeartRadio, iTunes, ExtremeGenes.com, and Spotify. Talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.